Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Album of the Week video. This is episode number 241, and so for today's episode, I am here to spotlight El Quemas, the third consecutive full-length album for Spanish rockers Obús. Originally released on March 12th, 1984 via both the Chapa Discos label and even Mausoleum Records. So, with all that said, let's begin. When it comes to Spanish metal in the 80s, the most notable names are Miro, Angeles del Infierno, and Baron Rojo. But Obús were definitely in the middle there for big name recognition in Spain. Based out of the community of Madrid and Madrid, Spain, formed in 1980 by bass player Juan Luis Serrano and guitarist Paco Laguna. The band's name is Spanish for howitzer, the name of a tank. Manolo Cano would join them as their drummer, and soon by 1981, they would get vocalist Fortush Sanchez. Sometime in July, drummer Manolo Cano would be out of the band. He would go on to perform in Triton. His replacement would be Fernando Sanchez. They would go on to take part in a contest that was held at the rock festival of Villa de Madrid, where they would win and eventually open up for Baron Rojo. Soon after, they would record their debut album in July of that same year, which would be titled Preparate. They would also go on to sign with the fairly successful Spanish label Chapa Discos, who would release the album by October 26th, within the same year. By August of 1982, they would record their second full-length album, Poderoso como el Treno, which would then be released by October 25th in the same year of 1982. Both albums would perform fairly well, gaining a solid reputation for the band. The success for the band would be great enough to attract the attention of Mark Dodson, who was just coming off the heels of working with producer Tom Allom on Judas Priest's soon-to-be then top-selling album, Defenders of the Faith, to go back to Spain to help out on Obús's third full-length album. The recording sessions would begin in January of 1984 over at the Mediterráneo Studios in Ibiza, Spain, located in the Balearic Islands. By the end of January, the album titled El Quemas would be finished and be quickly released on March 12th of the same year. So, featuring 10 tracks, clocking at the length of 36 minutes and 18 seconds, these 10 tracks are, I'm gonna warn you, since obviously you can tell my, Spanish really isn't my second native language, I'm obviously gonna try my best to pronounce all of these song titles, okay? So bear with me, folks, especially for those who are from Spain. So here we go. Opening up the album, we have Vivere, then into Deprisa, Vamos Ma Buen, Autopista, FM, El Quemas, La Raya, Alguien, Diugul, and then Juego Sucio. Again, that's the best I can go on with, so it's a bit of a valiant effort, I guess. So there you go, folks. There's your 10 tracks for El Quemas. I got into Obús sometime in July of 2016, acquiring both their debut 1981 album, Preparate, and of course, here with this album, El Que Mas. With this album, as I'll go into the actual review portion of this episode, the band begins to develop a more simpler song arrangement approach, which the band would further establish with the subsequent albums, afterwards. All of these songs are straight up fun time hooky rockers. But what's gone is the raw attitude, the free and looseness of the previous two albums. In replacement are shorter, simpler song arrangements with huge sing-along choruses and lyrical melodies, all topped with layered vocals and a huge, glossier production that gives off a arena-like atmosphere again. That's definitely thanks to Mark Dodson, who, again, obviously I just covered Defenders of the Faith, and obviously that album really does have a very dated sort of 80s production. And now I know, obviously being familiar with some of the other albums that Mark Dodson produced on, I know that some of the albums that he would do after El Que Mas, let's say you go into, Accept and Metal Church and Anthrax, they sound fairly, and even Udio, I'm actually forgetting about Udio, they do sound more grounded and kind of at times less dated, but definitely it's very apparent with this album and the previous one that I obviously spotlighted, Defenders of the Faith, that this is definitely really glossy. And with Obús here, comparing this to the previous two albums, this is so overproduced in comparison, but it's definitely not nearly as overproduced to compare to Pyromania and some of the other albums that were coming around, at the same time that were big budgeted rock albums. So with tracks like Autopista, with its almost pop-like arrangements, or Vamos Ma Buen, which are built on the same groovy, heavy boogie swag that the songs on the previous two albums were built on, but here are more structured out and in many ways feel super rehearsed in comparison to how everything used to be composed on for the first two. And with these two, it's no secret that these were obviously singles for the album. But that doesn't mean the album is a huge sellout. That album would come in 2 years. But the signs are there with how everything is just made here. But there are some fun hard rockers to be found, like the opening Vivere, La Raya, and Daigual, which still retains that same hooky hard rock and drive of old. But this album does have its fair share of smoking bangers, like the hammer down of Deprisa Deprisa, or the rapid attacks of the title track and album closer Juego Sucio, which all rock adequately, just solid enough to satisfy my itch. There is the instrumental FM, which is a fairly decent rocker, but nothing too earth-shaking to warrant deep analysis. Finally, we have the track Alguien, which is a Spanish rendition of Adrian Smith's pre-Iron Maiden band's Urchin's song, Need Somebody, which the Urchin song can be found on the High Roller comp Get Up and Get Down, which, for the record, I do own. I don't know how they actually got a hold of this track, since it wasn't, technically mass-produced in the early 80s. I mean, I don't know if you can say Urgent stuff was mass-produced, but you kind of know where I'm getting at, since it wasn't released past, let's say, a studio demo tape that obviously didn't get physically released or physically mastered or anything. And since the version or whatever and the stuff that's found on that Get Up and Get Down comp are almost more rehearsal-like. They're very raw rehearsals with the way the recording is, and it's really raw. So you can tell that nothing was quite developed. But I wouldn't pass it that Adrian Smith might have gave it to them, at least these recordings, while possibly playing a show with Iron Maiden. Anyways, it's a competent cover rendition, nothing too groundbreaking, and won't make any great covers list. But it's not too jarring to warrant an awful rating. It just exists. But still, what we have here as a whole is a pretty enjoyable album. El Quemos may not compete fairly well against some of the giants in heavy metal, but it doesn't mean that this is a bad generic album. It's still a fairly fun, competent heavy metal album, and it's definitely one that is, in a way, sort of worth checking out. And it's definitely an album that I can hang with. So, for my European compadres, if you have any memories or thoughts of living with this album or just being familiar with this album and the band itself, then you know what to do. And if so, you have any thoughts, if they are, positive or negative, you can leave them all down in the comment section below. But if you're a newcomer to classic 80s Spanish metal and are possibly only familiar with Baron Rojo, then I can't completely lure you away from this album or even Obús in general, because I think they are still worth checking out. And so if you are looking for a guide for yourself to dive into the realms of classic 80s Spanish metal, then again, do check out Obús. And of course also other bands like Muro and my personal favorite, Angelus del Infierno. So with all that said, I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later, and take care, everyone.